Howdy! You're listening to the Breakaway Podcast, a Bible study recorded on the campus of Texas A&M. Thanks for listening and enjoy the talk.
Well, great whats are only considered great if there's a powerful why behind them. No action is significant to us unless we can understand the reason that drives that action. So if we're going to appreciate a what, we have to understand the why that's driving it, right? I would illustrate it this way. A simple way to see it would just think about your favorite movies. I mean, the most powerful, the most moving ones, the ones you cried in, right? And imagine the most climactic moment of that movie. Now try to imagine having no understanding of what that story's about, not knowing the characters, not knowing their motivations, knowing what's going on. Imagine just walking into the theater right when that climactic moment is happening. What would your response be? How moved would you be? If you walked into Lord of the Rings and you stand there and go, so why is that little man carrying that other little man? Because his ring is heavy? It doesn't even make any sense. Where are their shoes, right? I mean, it wouldn't move you. You'd miss all the power, right? Or some of you guys have experienced this as someone has tried to explain to you the value of the Twilight series. They were like, you don't understand. He loves her. He didn't drink her blood, and that shows his love. And you go, do you even hear yourself right now? Do you hear what you're saying? How crazy that sounds, right? These events don't carry weight for us unless we understand the whys that drive them. It's the same with being an Aggie. You've felt it as an Aggie. That you've had friends come and they've showed up and they're like, oh, don't walk on that grass. Take your hat off. You're like, you people are strange. You don't make any sense. And they say that because they don't understand the reasons. But when someone explains to them the reason we don't walk on that grass, because that's the memorial student centering, honoring those who died for our freedom in World War II. When they put that around them, that's why we take off our hat as a sign of respect. When you put those great whys behind the what, suddenly the what becomes so much more compelling. It even becomes beautiful to us. And we're not going to be moved unless the why that drives the what is something that we find significantly moving. Some of you have seen it in your relationships. It might have even happened to you this weekend. That you were sitting on your couch and your roommate came in and said, hey, let's go dancing tonight. You say, I don't want to. Why do you want to go? I just want to dance. You're like, that's not a good reason. I don't, so I'm not going. Come on, there's a big group going. There's a big group doing a lot of things. Still not motivating. And they keep pestering you. Come on, it'll be fun. Come on, let's go. Don't you just love to dance? And you're like, that's not a motivational enough reason, until finally they say to you, well, I want to go because he's going to be there. And you go, oh, that's the real reason. Yeah, dancing's wonderful. Crowds are great. But the reason you want to go, the big why, is love, right? And as a good roommate, you might go, all right, let me get my boots, all right, and go out, because that's a significant reason. So if we're going to be moved by a what, we have to understand the why that drives it. Okay? Now, why tell you that? For this reason. We've been looking at the book of Exodus, right? That great epic story in the Old Testament. One of the most famous stories in history of God liberating his people from slavery in Egypt, setting them free and giving them a whole new life in a wonderful land of promise. It's an incredible story, and we didn't get to read all of what we're covering tonight. We're looking at the 10 plagues. That time where Moses comes in and tells Pharaoh, let my people go. And Pharaoh won't do it. And so God sends wave after wave of plague into Egypt, and we didn't get to read them all. It covers several chapters, but many of us are familiar with them. God turning the Nile into blood and sending frogs and gnats and flies and all manner of chaos into Egypt in order to get his people free, right? And so we know that story. Oh, that's a great story. But what I want to do tonight is I want to ask the question, why the plagues? Why did God do that? Right? And here's the reason I want to ask that. You go, so that's why we're out here on the field, is to answer a Bible trivia question? No. It's not just so that you'll have something cool to say at parties. Do you know why the plagues happened? All right, there's a bigger reason. It's because if we can understand why God did this back in Egypt, this amazing story that's traveled through centuries, if we can get our mind around why he did that, then we get revealed to us the motivations of God, the same God who's alive today. And if we understand his why back then, it will give us an understanding of the whys of what he's doing in our lives. And let me tell you something, you want to know that. Some of the biggest questions you ask in life are why? God, why am I here? Why am I on this campus? Why am I alive? Why is this situation happening? We want to know the whys, but if we can get our mind around the whys that he did this, it will open a window to us of why he does the things he does in your life. So make no mistake, this is about us. And so we're going to jump into it, and the only questions we're going to ask and answer here tonight are, one, why did he do them? Why the 10 plagues? Why those particular plagues? And then why do we care? What does it mean for us? And so the first one, why the plagues? And here's the thing, we all know what. We all say, well, I know why he did it. Ben, he did it to set the slaves free, right? He was liberating the Israelites. That's why he did it, to set them free. Or some say he did it to punish the Egyptians because having slaves is bad. And so he's punishing them for slavery, right? And yet I would challenge you and say that's just a superficial understanding. Because if you thought about it, if he just wanted to set the Israelites free, couldn't he have done it in an easier way? I mean, he could have just miracled them out of there. Pharaoh wakes up the next day and goes, where are my slaves, right? And they're just gone. Or if he wanted to punish Egypt, he could have just lit the place on fire, right? Say, everybody dead, all right? He didn't need to talk to them about it. He didn't need to have a conversation about it. He could have just ended them, right? Why go on and on with, I'm going to send some frogs, then I'm going to send some gnats, and then I'm going to send some flies, and then here come the locusts. Why does he keep doing that? What's going on here? Well, to make it even weirder, we talked last week about when God called Moses and said, hey, I want you to go to Egypt. I want you to tell the king, Pharaoh, let my people go, and I'm going to perform some wonders, and he lets you go. Moses gets on a donkey, he rides to Egypt, and then God saddles up next to him right before he's going to talk to the Pharaoh, and God starts giving Moses a pep talk like a coach. And he says, Moses, it's going to be like I said earlier. I want you to get in there. I want you to tell him to let my people go. And then God throws in an added detail. And then Moses, I'm going to harden his heart so he won't do it. Now get in there. Right? And if you're Moses, you're like, all right, wait, what? You're sending me to go let our people go. And you're going to work with him to not? That doesn't make any sense. That would be like Coach Sumlin calling in plays, saying, all right, we're going to run it right up the middle. And then yelling to the defense, it's Molina up the middle. Like, why are you doing that? Or worse, it would be like him calling in the play and then running out there to play linebacker and be like, I got you. And you're like, why are you working against us? And if you're Moses, you're going, wait a second, you're sending me to set them free and you're going to work with Pharaoh to make sure they don't. What? Why are you doing that? And the fascinating thing is, you get a little window into it. As Pharaoh hears this story of why Moses is coming, he says, who is the Lord that I should obey him? I don't know who the Lord is. And you see God begins to move towards Moses, and we don't have time to read all the texts over and over again. He tells him in places like Exodus chapter 7. He says, go speak to him. And then he says, go do what I'm about to tell you to do. So the Egyptians shall know that I'm the Lord God. And then he tells him later in Exodus 7, hey, go back and cue the blood, man. Turn the Nile into blood. And he says, thus say the Lord, by this you shall know that I'm the Lord. With your staff, turn the Nile into blood. Later, Pharaoh still won't let him go. God says, cue the frogs, get them coming up out of the Nile. They get into their beds, into their kitchens. It's crazy. Pharaoh says, get them out of here. Moses says, they'll be out of here tomorrow just to show you God is God because you can't get rid of a bunch of frogs that fast. And he says, I'm going to do it that way in Exodus 8 so that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. He sends the flies in all over Egypt except where the people of God live. And he says, I'm going to have flies everywhere except in a given area. Wouldn't that be nice? That you may know that I'm the Lord in the midst of the earth. He sends the hail so that you may know that there is none like me in the earth. And then finally he lets Pharaoh in on it with the hail thing. He tells him, for by now I could have put out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence and cut you off from the earth. But for this purpose I've raised you up, to show my power, so that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. He tells Pharaoh, let me tell you what's happening here. If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't have to have a conversation about it. You don't talk to an ant before you step on it. You don't go, hey buddy, that's a no-no. You just step on it, right? And God says, look, I could have killed you a long time ago, but let me tell you why I'm doing this. He said, I'm sending wave after wave of plague. Why? So that you may know who I am. And don't miss the significance of that. This isn't just about setting God's people free. He's going to set them free. But it's also for the Egyptian, that the Egyptian might know God. And not just the Egyptian, he says, so that my name may be proclaimed in all the earth. He says, the reason I'm dragging this out, the reason I've made it this way is, yes, I'm going to set my people free, but I want the Egyptians to know me too. And not just the Egyptians, I want all the earth to know me, because Egypt was the lead nation of its day. Everybody knew what was going on in Egypt. So that when the people of God travel hundreds of miles later, a prostitute in a foreign town will say, oh, I know what he did. And I believe in the Lord because I saw what he did in Egypt. He says, I want the earth to know me. And not only the earth, he says later when he sends the locusts, he says, I have hardened the heart of Pharaoh that I may show these signs, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and your grandson how I dealt with the Egyptians and the signs I've done, that you may know that I am the Lord. God says, the reason I'm doing this is so that my people would know me, so the Egyptians would know me, so the earth would know me, and not just the earth, but your sons and grandsons and generations would know me. Why the 10 plagues? Because God is the God of everybody. And he wants everyone to know him. He's not out to destroy the Egyptians. He's out to bring them into a knowledge of him. And by the time the people of God leave, it says a great multitude went with them. They said, he is God and I'm on his team. Why did God do these plagues? Because God is the God of everybody and he wants everyone to know him. That's what drives the heart of our God tonight. So that centuries later we could be sitting in a field talking about a God who controls all of creation like this. It's interesting. Christianity still gets a rap in some places. People will say, well, Christianity, it's primarily a white people religion. Or they say it's primarily an American religion. Which if you think about it, you can understand where that argument comes, because there are other religions that are sort of have a geographical hub. Like 97% of Hindus live in India. Many leave, but there's a hub there. Islam, much of it is located around the hub of Mecca. Christianity, it started in the Middle East, but then the hub moved to Europe, and then the hub moved to America. And now as you look at a map, you see that Christianity, there are over 6 billion people on the planet tonight. 6.9 billion to be exact. 2.18 billion of them are Christians. Over 60% of those Christians live below the equator. Did you know that? That there are 24% of those who would say I'm a Christian in this world today live in sub-Saharan Africa. That's twice as many as live in North America. There are twice as many Christians in South America as there are in North America. There are more Christians in Asia and the Pacific than there are in America. So Christianity, the God of the Bible, it's not just for white people. It's not just for Americans. There aren't many white people running around in the Bible. And the reality is, even today, Christianity has always moved out of its borders, spreading out, and even now it's advancing around the world. Why? Because God accomplishes what he set out to do. He's the God of everybody, and he wants everybody to know him. Why is God doing some of the things he's doing in your life? I don't know all the reasons. But I remember sitting with a young man who was very bright. Now, he was actually an older guy, but he was very bright, successful in business, amazing at certain things, and then God brought some illness in his life, some relational difficulty. All this stuff was happening, and I remember riding in a car with him, and as we were riding, we never talked about spiritual things, not an interest in his life. We're just riding in the car, and I'll never forget, he just stops at one moment as we're driving, and he says, do you think God does stuff to us on purpose? Or do you think we're all just kind of bouncing around here? And I remember it took me off guard because he's never wanted to talk about God. And I was a college student at the time, and I was scared of giving him the wrong answer. So I did one of those like, help me, Lord, kind of prayers. And I said something that as I've lived through life, I've realized I think he helped me because it was marvelously true. I told him, I believe that more than anything else, God wants you to know him. And so he will give to you whatever he needs to give to you. and he will take from you whatever he needs to take from you so that you'll pay attention to him and you'll know him. And some of you, God has moved your situation in life to put you in a place where you would show up and sit on the ground in a field to hear a sermon about him because you're just at a place of going, okay, I'm ready to listen. And that's exactly what he's been wanting to do. He's the God of everybody, and he wants everyone to know him. And let me just say a side note to Christians. If you notice, he blesses his people, but whenever God blesses his people, that blessing is never for them alone. And so hear that in your own life, Christian. Whenever God blesses his people, that blessing is never for them alone. So was he to set the Israelite free? Yes, but he said, I'm going to set you free, and I'm going to do it in a way that blesses the Egyptian. And many of you, God has set you free from enormous sin. He didn't just do it so you can go, whoo, glad that's over. He did it so you can be a blessing to others who are hurting. And he has blessed you monetarily and physically and intellectually and with opportunity. And let me tell you something, Christian. God's blessing on you is never meant for just you alone. It's meant for everybody because God's the God of everybody. And he wants everyone to know him. Now, some of you hear that and you go, Ben, I keep hearing that. People say that. And I read the Bible and it's like, God just wants you to know him. I want you to know me. I want you to know me. I want you to praise me. I want you to love me. I want you to be near to me. I want you to be, and some of you go, isn't that a little egotistical? Like, why is God so desperate for my attention? Yes, he was my maker. Great. Someone made my iPad, but I don't know that guy. He's not calling me that was like, just want you to know I made that. All right, right? I don't need to know every maker in the world. Why does the maker of the world want me to know him so bad? C.S. Lewis, when he was an atheist, said, as I read the book of Psalms and God was saying, praise me, know me, love me, praise me, he said, I feel like he sounds like an old woman seeking compliments. Or in our vernacular, we would say it sounds like a pop star, right? It's just desperate for your attention. Listen to my music, please. I'll take my clothes off. I'll do whatever. I'll shake it. Just pay attention to me. And it just feels desperate to some of us. So why does God want me to know him so bad? Isn't it arrogant or egotistical for him to just be so obsessed with us knowing him? Well, let me say it this way. It's pride to be self-promoting if you're just trying to fill your vacancies. If God's out here just trying to get you to praise him because he's like, I'm just so lonely and I need affirmation. My self-esteem is at the bottom. I need a crowd of kids. Come on, people, sing to me, right? If that's what he's doing, if it's pride that's driving his self-promotion, man, that's empty. That's vanity. But if he really is what we need, then it's not pride. It's love that drives him to promote himself. So we've had situations at Breakaway before where people have passed out. Lord willing, none of that's going to happen tonight. I hope you drank a lot of water. But we've had people pass out in Breakaway, right? Now at that moment, we have medics on hand. And so we have a medic that rushes in to get to them. And he should, right? And I've never had anyone come up to me and say, hey, this person fell out. And then this arrogant medic was all, hey, I'm the medic, move y'all. You were like, dude, that guy's so full of himself. Nobody says that. Because at that moment, if this person's in need, you need a medic. He's got the resources. He's got that bag of tricks. He's got the training. Get over here. It would be hateful for him to not push through the crowd and say, move, give me space, let me take center stage. He would be selfish to not do that if he's in the corner going, I don't want to interrupt their convulsion. I mean, it's their decision. It's their life. Like, who am I to... Get in there, bro! You're the medic! God is the God of everybody. And God will move heaven and earth for you to know him. Why? Because he is what you need. Because you need him. You need him. Which incidentally is the answer to the second question, why these plagues? It's interesting as you read commentators about them. Commentators are fairly underwhelmed by the plagues, right? Because they just weren't all that spectacular. They kind of followed a natural progression. God poisoned the Nile, their water source. So the frogs left the Nile. Then the frogs died. So the flies came out. And then it spread disease to the cattle, spread to the people. It has this natural progression. They're like, if God wanted to get people's attention, couldn't he have done bigger than that? And think about it. If God really wanted to just scare Pharaoh, couldn't he have gone bigger than that? Moses could have just walked in and said, hey, Pharaoh, watch this, and just pointed at all his people and went, light on fire. And suddenly they're all on fire. Oh, run around. And Moses is like, you're next, son. It would have been over in one plague, right? Pharaoh would have said, they're yours. Where are my people? Let his people go. Get them out of here, right? He could have lifted up all of Egypt into the air. Moses could have flown around, right? Just zapping people. Ah, it's Moses. Everybody down. Give him what he wants. God's plagues, they kind of have a more natural flow. Why? Why pick those? I mean, would you have if you were God? Send in the frogs. There's two reasons why he did it this way. One, and all commentators see this. I wish I could walk you through all of it. It's beautiful. What you see God doing with these plagues is there's high repetition in language in the plague series and in Genesis chapter 1. In Genesis chapter 1, God took darkness and water. And he took the water and he began to move it and create land. And then as he created space for land, grass began to grow. Then he created animals to eat that grass. Then he created the weather, stars and moons so that we would get seasons and years so that this world would work together. You see a God who's a God of order, and he creates an ecosystem where everything works together. Plants serve animals. Animals serve the plants. The sky works with us. The ground grows because of the rain. All of it works together. God creates these physical laws in the universe that as they're followed, everyone flourishes. Why? Because he's the Lord of creation. And you see, as he shows up here, he says, you need me. You need me. And to show you that, let me just show you what happens when I pull my hand back from you. You want to be God, Pharaoh? You want to run this place? Let me pull it back. And what do you see happen? You see the water rebel against him. You see animals rebel against humanity. You see that the sky, by the end of it, goes dark. And you see by the end of the plagues, Egypt has moved back to the beginning of Genesis, to darkness and chaos. You reject God and things break down. That's the message. You uncreate. You disintegrate. That's what happens when we sever our relationship with our Maker. And you know this physically. Many of you know this. I heard a guy say it this way, Tim Keller, I loved it. He said, it would be like if you found out you had a heart condition. Men, you probably don't now. Wait till you're 40. You're going to go sit with a doctor. And he's going to say, hey, your heart's clogged. You got heart problems. What are they going to say? Stop eating bacon. Stop eating steak. Stop eating everything that tastes good. Jog, do Pilates, do all the stuff you hate, right? They're going to tell you to change your life, right? Now, none of you men, as they level that on you, right, are going to go, you're so egotistical and self-righteous. Who are you to tell me what to do? Oh, I'm a doctor. You're going to just make up your own rules? You're going to take away ice cream too? You don't do that. Why? Because you understand they're just syncing you up with reality. They're saying that's reality. Those are laws you can't break. And if you break them, you'll be back in the hospital or you'll be dead. Because that's the way the world works. And we all know there's laws like that. You want to smoke away your life? You can do that. But when you get lung cancer, you know there's a connection to these things. Relationally, you want to hold on to bitterness? You want to be an unforgiving person? You can do that. But let me tell you something. When you close off your heart and refuse to love or care about somebody, that refusal is not indiscriminate. You don't just get to harden a part of your heart. Your whole heart gets hard. And I counsel with people that, man, they refuse to forgive, and you see later they can't love well. It'll damage your marriage. You want to take sex outside the boundaries of marriage? That God says, I created sex to be enjoyed this way? We'd say, don't tell me how to do that. I'll do whatever I want. And yet you see in the culture, people with no connection to a God, no affiliation with a religion, find out over time. And I meet with them all the time. They'll come to me in counseling and they'll say, I divorced sex from love, emotional intimacy and relationship, because I just wanted the sex, because sex is fun, and it was fun the first time, second time, third time, however many times, but on it went, and I found that even the joy of sex was gone, and all I'm left with is an ache in my heart. And you go, that's because God has set out laws that when we follow him, everyone flourishes. When you break him, he steps away, and what do you have? physical disintegration, emotional disintegration, relational disintegration. You get chaos. You get uncreated. Rebellion against God is violence against yourself. It is. And so God in love will move towards you, and he'll do what he did to Egypt. The other reason why he picked these plagues, and we won't go through them all, is because they were connected with Egyptian deities. And he did it to show them, you denounced me, and you've built your life around something else. Let me show you that that something else won't solve your problems. They won't feed the ache in you. And so he sends frogs because they worshiped a frog deity. She can't help you. He darkens the sun because they worship the sun. That's not going to fill you up. He starts taking away the things they're addicted to so that they will go through detox. The 10 plagues are a rehab clinic that he would get them off the craziness of trying to live life without him, that they would bow their knee and say, you're really God, and if I want to flourish, I need you. It's interesting, I watched a series of videos recently about Jay-Z, about his new album. I don't know if any of you listen to Jay-Z. I would have picked a country artist, but I don't know that many of them. But I'm watching these videos Jay-Z did to promote his album. And on these videos, it shows him in the recording studio. And he's got this amazing studio, and Jay-Z is there, and he's got Timbaland mixing the beats. And you're like, that's insane. He's got Pharrell in there. He's got all these guys that are incredibly talented rappers, and all of them like have their own clothing line, right? And then as he's cutting to these different people, suddenly the video cuts to a guy that's got a long beard and no shoes and is sleeping on the couch. And they just cut to him and show him real quick, and you're like, who let the homeless guy in? And the whole time you're watching the video, you see all these guys with incredible style, and then you see this guy, he's wearing yoga shorts and Crocs. And you're like, one of these things is not like the other. You're like, is that just part of his creative process? Like, I need a homeless guy in here. Like, what does this mean? And if you don't know who he is, you fail to appreciate that it's Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin is the guy that people go to when they want their career to go next level. And so Rick Rubin is a producer that's helped all these different people, from the Beastie Boys to Run DMC to the Red Hot Chili Peppers to Dixie Chicks to Metallica, AC/DC, Sheryl Crow, Lana Del Rey, Adele, Kanye West, Eminem, Johnny Cash. Any different genre, you want to get next level, you call that bearded man. Right? And you do it because his method is he will take no bull. He says, I don't want to hear your story. I don't want to hear about your ego. I don't want to hear about the image you're trying to put out there. I want you to be honest with me about what's really in your heart. And if you won't be real with me, I'm gone. And so when he sits with people, he makes them get real. And in these videos, you see he's doing it with Jay-Z. Jay-Z's only talking to Rick. And he's telling him about this album. And he's telling him about the songs he wrote. I Just Want a Picasso. About wanting success, about the Holy Grail. He said, when I was living in the projects, I saw money as the answer. I saw it as success. I thought it would fill me. I wanted that. And so I wrote this song, I Want a Picasso. I want all the best things in the world. And as he said that, Rick Rubin fills in and says, and yet you found in life experience, you've gotten enough of those things to realize they don't change your life at all. And Jay-Z agrees. And so he writes this album about getting all this money, getting all this success, thinking it would be the answer. And when he got it, he finds it has not satisfied his heart at all. And so he talks about the beauties of having a daughter. A daughter's better than a Picasso, which is true, by the way. But then as he gets to talk about his daughter, he begins to tell Rick, I didn't have a dad. And he said, so as a young man, I never learned how to be a man and treat a woman right. And he said, and I never learned how to be a father. He said, and now I've been given a little girl and I'm her dad. And he said, and I realize I have none of the tools I need to take care of her. And you watch him get choked up because he wants to create Eden for this little girl. He wants to create a safe, beautiful world where she can flourish. And yet he looks inside himself and he says, and I don't have it. I don't have it. And through the album, he's asking all the right questions, and he has none of the right answers. And so many of you, you're searching for a career, a job, for money, for that girl, for that guy, for that position, that status, that shirt, that recognition to fill your heart. And God will either keep it from you because it's not a God that's worth your worship, or he'll give it to you. And I think that's worse. Because when you get your fill of it, you'll see the gods I'm chasing, they don't satisfy my soul. They're not a good answer. So God's the God of everybody, and he wants everybody to know him. Why? Because you need him. Because you need him. You can't flourish without him. There's a God-shaped vacuum in the hearts of men, and only God can fill it. You need him. And so why should I care about this? Because God's the God of everybody who wants us to know him. He's what you need. And he will satisfy all of you. He'll satisfy all of you. And here's what I mean by that. It's funny to look at our culture. We are simultaneously drawn to and repulsed by the story of the 10 plagues and God getting his people out of Egypt. We're schizophrenic in that way. We're drawn to it because we love the idea of these people being oppressed and then God beating up the bad guys, right? So we watch the Prince of Egypt cartoon, and when the water closes on Pharaoh, we're like, that's right, sucker. That's what you get. Slavery is bad, right? And we love the bad guy getting his. And yet many of us, the same people, that when someone talks to us about the Bible, you go, whoa, I don't like the Bible because the God in the Old Testament is judgmental and judgment is bad. And I don't want anything to do with him because he judges people. And we're weird because simultaneously we love his judgment on evil and we hate his judgment. We love his judgment. Why? Because we want justice. And it's right that we want justice. In all of our hearts, when we see children being hurt, we want that to stop. And it's not just that we want vengeance, let's kill that guy, but we want him to be stopped, put him in jail. We celebrate when rapists are put in prison. Get him away from these girls. We want justice, right? We want it. All of our hearts scream for it. And yet at the same time, when we see our vacancies, when we see our addictions, when we see that we violate our own moral standards, then we don't want justice because it's terrifying. And so we want a just God, but we also want a God of grace. We want justice and we want grace. That's what our heart screams for. And here's the beautiful thing about the 10 plagues. That's what we get. It's what we get. It's interesting if you watch the plagues. If God was just trying to destroy Egypt and punish them, he does a really sorry job. Because he always tells them beforehand what he's going to do. Pharaoh, I want you to let my people go. If you won't, I'm going to send the frogs. Pharaoh says, I'm not going to do it. He's like, all right, the frogs are coming tomorrow. The frogs come in. Pharaoh says, I want these frogs out of here. And God says, okay, I'll take them away. And you're like, that doesn't sound like vengeance. I'm going to punish you. Don't punish me. That's cool, right? And he does it. When God sends the hailstorm, he tells Pharaoh ahead of time, Pharaoh, I'm sending hail tomorrow. So you may want to get your livestock indoors, and you may want to give your servants a day off. Because if they're outside tomorrow, like 3 o'clock, they're all going to die. And so you're going to want to put them inside so nobody loses their life. And you're like, if God's trying to exact vengeance, that's like the worst strategy ever. If he just wanted vengeance, he would have waited till they were all outside. He would have said, wait a second, wait for it. Hailstorm, all right. And he would have timed it for maximum damage. And he doesn't. Why? Because when God announces judgment, it's because judgment is the last thing he wants to do. And God says to Pharaoh, and he says to you tonight, I hate evil. I hate the evil things that were done to you. I hate the evil that lurks in you that if you're honest, you hate too, but can't get out. I hate it, and I will judge it. I am just. And yet I love you. I want everyone to know me. And so all who will come to me, I come rushing in with grace. And those who bow and trust in him, Their livestock were okay. Those who bowed and trusted him, when the darkness came, he drew them into the light. Those who trusted him, at the very end, he said, the last plague is I'm sending death. And death came to every house in Egypt, except for those who took an innocent lamb and killed it and put its blood on the doorposts. And God wanted an image for them. I will bring judgment, and yet someone innocent can die, a little animal. And if you put yourself under the shed blood of the innocent one, my judgment will pass right over you. I will send you a means of grace, and it will be that my punishment lands on someone else. So when Jesus shows up on the scene, Jesus comes in and he says, I'm God on earth. People say, I don't believe that. And so he starts doing miracles, not to uncreate, but to show them that he has power over creation. Not to show us disintegration apart from God, but to show us he has the power of God in him and he can take death away. So he moves towards the sick and he takes sickness away. He moves towards the blind and he takes blindness away. He moves towards the dead and says, don't be dead anymore. And they rise. And Jesus shows them, I am God made man, and I have the power to take your uncreation, your disintegration, and weave it back to life. That's who I am. And he says, God hates sin, but I came not to judge, but to save. And so on the night that the people of God celebrated the Passover, that was the day that God sent judgment to Egypt, except on those who would put their trust in the blood of the innocent one. Jesus stood up at that meal, and as they drank a glass of wine, he said, this isn't wine. This doesn't symbolize the blood of some lamb at the Passover. He says, this is my blood shed for you. He takes the bread and breaks it and says, this isn't a symbol of your oppression in Egypt. This is my body, and it's going to break for you. And when he got on that cross, at the moment of his greatest pain, as wave after wave of judgment and pain landed on him, at the moment of greatest agony, God turned out the lights, and Jesus landed in total darkness, the chaos of disintegration, and he did it for us. Because God will judge evil, but God is a God of grace. And so he brings judgment, but he got someone to take that judgment for us. That whoever comes to the true and better Moses, Jesus Christ, he leads us out of our sin. He calls us to know him, to have an intimate relationship with him. Now this is eternal life, that you would know the only true God and Jesus Christ whom he's sent. And when you come to know him, he reveals to you purpose, and he starts to weave into your soul life. And that's what I want for you. Ringing Simpson Drill Field are 55 trees. They were planted long ago to commemorate the lives of the 55 men who gave their lives for our country in World War I. As you walk through those doors in the Memorial Student Center, there's a plaque with many more names of those men who gave their lives for our freedom in World War II. And over that plaque is a Bible verse that says, greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his lives for his friends. We're surrounded by the love of men who would give their lives so we could be free. And we're surrounded tonight by love of a God who sent his son Jesus to give us life and set us free. And my prayer is that you'd know him.
Howdy, and thanks for listening to the Breakaway Podcast. My name is Brent, and I'm sitting here with Ben Stewart. And it is Wednesday, the day after an historic breakaway.
That's right.
Happened on the center of campus at Simpson Drill Field.
Yeah, man.
And it blew my expectations. God really, there were no walls, but he blew it up. He blew it up, Ben. It was incredible.
You know, it's funny, man. Just looking back, Brent, at our experience of just going, okay, how do we handle some of our space issues and some of the challenges with getting venues, and how do we do all this? And then us landing at that place of going, we think we're supposed to move to Simpson. And just, I remember sitting with you going, is this like crazy? Does this even make sense? Can we even do this? And just praying and saying, okay, Lord, we feel like this is what you're calling us to do. Let's go for it. And just, okay, this is experimental. Who knows? And then showing up last night and watching students literally pour in from the four corners of Simpson. I mean, coming from every angle, just continuing to fill up this field, and then to hear the worship echoing off the Memorial Student Center and Albritton Tower, and people were hearing it in neighborhoods distant from the campus. It's just unreal, man.
Yeah.
Unreal. So powerful. Mm-hmm. And I think my favorite part, too, is, our prayer had been this whole time not just to have more students than ever, although every indicator is that was the biggest breakaway we've ever done. That's awesome. But we were praying, Lord, bring people that would just never stumble into a building with us, would just never walk across the street to Reed Arena to go to a Bible study, but they will walk past the MSC and go, what on earth is that? Mm-hmm. And what I loved is we were praying for that student, and I talked to so many of our people, volunteers, staff, and then even myself, that just met people that were like, I don't know what this is. I just walked up, help me understand what's going on here, and just talk to me about what it is you people are about, because I want to know more about God. I want to know more about what's happening. And just so many of us had that story. That's what was thrilling I was wired till like 4 a.m. last night. Just unbelievable, man. Crazy.
Yeah. Well, a unique experience we got is that same similar thing. We were out there setting up, and just special thank you to all of our volunteers.
Unbelievable.
They crushed it last night, and we couldn't have done it without them. And they spent long hours out in the sun making a piece of ground and praying that God would turn it into a sanctuary, turn it into holy ground.
Yeah, man.
And so we got out there at about 7:30 in the morning on yesterday, and all the students walking by, just kind of looking at this thing coming together, because that stage and the lights and the speakers, it doesn't just appear. It takes a lot of work, and so we worked with some very skilled professional people to kind of pull that thing off, and our experience with them was incredible. So thank you to Wes and Vince and Adam. You guys were awesome, and I'm so grateful for y'all. But we had so many conversations with people that would just kind of walk to the side of the stage. They would just walk up and go, "Is this College Game Day or what is this?" And we're like, "No, we're a breakaway. College Game Day is coming in tomorrow."
That was one of my favorite stories, is like you said, College Game Day's Twitter was getting blown up by, "You guys are here?" And they're like, no, what? Like, sorry, it's a Bible study, man.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Well, and our volunteers were great. They came up to me and showed me one tweet, and I was like, why don't you just tweet back at them something, and see if they'll come out.
Yeah.
And they did, and people respond to them. So I just love that even if people thought it was College Game Day, we got to interact with them, and people who had never heard of Breakaway now know that there's people that are praying for them, that there's people who are preaching a message that's about a bigger story, and man, just so good, good.
Man. Loved it. Loved the stories. Loved the conversations I was able to have. It's tough because I want to tell you everything these folks told me, but then I don't want to respect kind of what was going on in their personal lives. But man, it was just so awesome, the things that we are getting to be a part of, and how special that moment was. So thank you to the university, to the Corps Cadets for letting us use their drill field, for the drum line of the Texas Aggie Band. If you're listening to this podcast, you obviously didn't get to be a part of that moment. But just to give you a mental picture, how do you call to worship, thousands upon thousands of students in the middle of a field? Well, the way we did it was Aggie style, and that is you drop the lights, and then the first thing they hear is a whistle blow, and 14 drummers from the drum line of the Texas A&M Fighting Texas Aggie Band launch into their walk-in cadence and just thunder it over the campus. And it was so cool, man. So we just had the whole stage filled with these drummers just banging it out, dude. And then just as soon as they boom, click, ended, worship kicked in. Yeah. And they just did awesome. So fun. But great night, man. Very grateful. Very grateful. We're weary, but it's the best kind of weary.
Yeah.
Weary in the best of all work, you know.
Yeah. I was thinking about how to describe what I was feeling yesterday, because people ask, you spend all day out there and they go, well, are you okay? And it's real easy to kind of go negative, but I was thinking I'm tired, but I'm full.
Yeah. That's
and
good, man.
that was the way that I could describe how I'm feeling on Wednesday after Simpson Drill Field.
Well, thank you to so many of you for praying for us. We felt that. Thank you for the encouragements that so many of you sent. We're grateful, and we just feel like God brings adversity, and he does it for beautiful purposes. We're actually going to talk about that in the weeks ahead in the series we're entering into. But we just have really felt his wind at our back this semester, and we know a lot of that is fueled by your prayer and support, and we're very grateful.
Yep. Well, if you're new to the podcast, the one piece of this is just to recap the night, to give you a little insight to how the night went, what happened, what's coming up. But then another part is to get some more insight, Ben, that you have maybe some things in your notes that you wanted to talk about but ran short on time. And we have this moment to where you can get those things kind of out, put them out there. And so if you have anything to add to your talk last night, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, man. It's this series is brutal. You just have to it's like visiting Rome. You go visit Rome and you go, I can't see it all. I can't. And so you just have to tell yourself, I'm going to see what I can and just trust that maybe someday later I'll get to come back and visit these other pieces. You know what I mean? That's what you have to do. When you preach the 10 plagues, that's chapter upon chapter, a huge amount of information. You're like, I can't fit it all in a sermon. And so it's brutal to look at all this beautiful, wonderful truth in there and just go, we're not going to cover it. I'm just going to cut all of it. We're going to cut so much out. Brutal for me. But you just trust that people will hear other sermons on it. Maybe I'll do a seminar on it one day. But there are great resources out there, whatever. But you just go, okay, but what from this do we feel like God has for us tonight? So I feel good about the sermon, and I'm not going to preach you everything in my notes. I have like 25 pages, but I just can't get into it all. But I did want to point out 3 things, Brent, if I could, that I just wanted to throw out there. One is another note about God's plan. Was his plan to judge Egypt? Yes, he calls it a judgment. And then you see it comes down with severity at the end on Pharaoh and his forces that march out to destroy Egypt or to destroy Israel. There are people coming to kill the Israelites as they leave, and God stops them and judges them with finality, drowns them in the sea. And so will God judge evil? Yes, he will. And so did God want to save people, even Egyptians? Absolutely. His message is that everyone would know him. And yet those who persist in their disobedience, he does bring judgment. He's slow to bring it. He's slow to anger. But when it comes with finality. But the beautiful thing is that God, even as he pronounces judgment, it's because he wants to bring redemption. And you see that all along. And what's beautiful about if you walk through the 10 plagues, you see Pharaoh's magicians are sort of the foil against Moses and Aaron. But once they get to the 3rd or 4th plague, they look and they say, this is the finger of God. And you see Pharaoh's magicians take a step away from Pharaoh and go, that's God over there. I know you're the son of the sun God, but what they're doing, that's God. Only God can do that, And then later you see Pharaoh's officials take a step away from Pharaoh and they say, hey, repent, relent, do what their God tells you to do. And then you see the Egyptian people. It says later that Moses was exalted in the eyes of the Egyptian people. And you see that God is literally separating many of the Egyptians away from their former deity-infused leadership of Pharaoh, because they're like, this isn't it. They've got it going on. And then by chapter 11, it says that the people of Israel journeyed forth, and a mixed multitude went with them, and very much livestock, flocks and herds. That a lot of people from a lot of different nations walked out with them, and that was God's heart. And so I wanted to put that out there. Some people go, well, Ben, didn't he judge the Egyptians? Well, yes, many of them. And yet he also brought mercy to those who would come to him. And what's beautiful, just to put a little tag at the end of the story, when you get to the book of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah is speaking of God's ultimate redemption from sin and at the very end bringing humanity into this new promised land where people from every tribe, tongue, and nation will bow down and worship God. And it's interesting. In Isaiah 19, he's speaking of that day, and he says, in that day there'll be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt. He says, they'll be worshiping Yahweh in Egypt. And he says later, he says, the Lord will strike Egypt, striking it and then healing it. And they will return to the Lord, and he'll listen to their pleas for mercy and heal them. He said, he'll come and heal Egypt. And then it says, in that day, there'll be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. Assyria will come into Egypt, Egypt into Assyria. The Egyptians will worship with the Assyrians. And that day, Israel will be the third with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the earth, whom the Lord of hosts has blessed, saying, blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance. What's interesting about that is if you look at Israel's history, to the north, their greatest enemy was the Assyrians. And to the south, their greatest enemy was Egypt. And yet Isaiah looks at that and says to these people that would have seen it that way, he says, hey, one day you'll all be brothers. And God will look at Egypt and call Egypt my son, my people. He'll call Assyria the work of my hands. You'll be worshiping together. And so God's ultimate plan was redemption because he wants everyone to know him. So that's true. And I just wanted to, punch that a little harder to show that. Second thing that some people trip over is they look and go, okay, Pharaoh hardened his own heart, shows up a lot, but then God hardened Pharaoh's heart. So the Lord's hardening Pharaoh's heart. Did Pharaoh have a choice? But then Pharaoh's hardening. So did God just harden it because Pharaoh had already hardened it? And people come up with answers and you go, well, how do you make sense of that? Well, we're not going to get into all the nuances of it, but I will say what's happening with Pharaoh is much like what's happening with Judas. Someone was going to betray the Messiah. That was ordained. It would occur exactly as God had predetermined for it to occur. And it was Judas. And yet you see Judas acting, and it is his own willful rebellion against Jesus. And so he's held accountable for his sin. So how does that work? That Judas, it's his own choice to rebel, and he's held responsible for it. And yet somehow in that exertion of his real decision-making, God sovereignly presides over all of it to work out his plan exactly as he's predestined it to occur. How do those two things run next to each other? There's mystery in there. And yet the Bible is comfortable with that tension, that we make real choices and have real accountability, and yet God works all things according to the counsel of his will. And so that's what you see happening here. Pharaoh has chosen to harden his heart, and yet God takes a hardened Pharaoh and uses a hardened Pharaoh and ordains a hardening of Pharaoh to accomplish his glorious purposes to save people. And so there's a lot of mystery in that, but ultimately you see the heart of God in it, that he is powerful and yet he's using that power to save. So there's mystery to it, but you see it operating in much the same way as Judas. Real decisions with real accountability, and yet God presides as sovereign over it. It's fascinating. Last thing I'll say is this, again, there's so much we could have covered, and I just feel like we hardly did this section justice. And so if you're one of those people that's like, oh man, Ben, I was really looking to go verse by verse through Exodus or something, let me say this. Some of what I'm reading that would be helpful, I think the best commentary I'm reading right now is the NIV application commentary. It's shorthand the NIVAC by Peter Enns, E-N-N-S. That one has been great. Peter Enns has done an amazing job. Douglas Stewart with the NAC, New American, I think, commentary. That one's been great too. Also read Sailhammer's summary of the Pentateuch has been really helpful. And then for this particular one, the second point, Tim Keller provided some insights that I think I referenced him, but I couldn't remember. But he provided some insights that were really helpful as well. So I say that for those of you that are like, oh man, I really want to go a lot deeper. Peter Enns, Douglas Stewart, Sailhammer, and Keller have been helpful to me in my preparations. But anyway, so I hope that's helpful to you. And man, I enjoyed last night.
Yeah.
I really did. And enjoyed preaching this text and can't wait to jump back in it next week.
Yeah. And next week is another kind of big one. I mean, it's Kyle Field.
We can't stop, man. Here we
No,
go.
we're going to be in there after the Aggies play Alabama this weekend.
Come on. Yeah. Praying over that field.
Yeah.
So we got a big game against Alabama. I don't know if y'all have heard about this one. It is the most expensive college football ticket in the country. Number 1 Alabama against the only team that beat them last year, Texas A&M.
Yeah.
It's going to be insane. And so we're going to beat Alabama
That's right.
and then celebrate the Lord who reigns sovereign over all things, including football games, that Tuesday in that same cow field.
That's right.
So it's going to be amazing.
Yep.
So I won't be there that Saturday. Are you going to be there, Brent?
I will be there
Maybe.
Saturday.
Yeah, maybe you will be.
Yeah.
How about that? I don't have the connections Brent does, so I'll be watching it from my house.
I think I have a way into the stadium.
I just had to throw that out there.
I'm excited.
I'm heartbroken about it.
I will send you a picture.
It's my fault. I should have gotten on this like a year ago. I just let the time go. But we have a TV,
Yeah.
so we'll watch it, and we'll be out there for Tuesday to praise God in the middle of Kyle Field,
That's right.
which is pretty amazing. Maybe the last time in a while.
Yeah, renovations start at the end of the last home game.
Yeah. But so we'll be in Kyle Field next week, and can't wait to jump back in Exodus, and can't wait to
Absolutely.
share it with you. So thank you all for tagging along with us.